Welcome back to 90 Seconds Plus, and we're back with Deputy Mayor Tom Campbell. Hey Tom, how are you?
Hey.
So let's kick off. Southland's been in the news the last week or so with the growth and great our real estate prices have held their own. There's really good positive stuff coming out at the moment about Southland. So what's your thoughts?
Well, actually, Mike, when you spoke to me 2 weeks ago, you absolutely killed it because you said we're going gangbusters, didn't you? And I like that expression, so steal it mercilessly, right? But it's true, you know, the announcements that came out last week about, firstly, we've got the highest growth in New Zealand. Secondly, the real estate prices are holding up better than the rest of New Zealand. And thirdly, the number of job vacancies advertised are higher than anywhere in New Zealand, per capita. So, I mean, and they are before we even get the Tiwai bounce.
Yes.
So these numbers are prior to the impact of the announcement in Tiwai. And that's going to be tremendous because, you know, practically every factory, every little workshop in the city is talking about retooling because now they've got 20 years ahead. Yes. So that's going to have a big impact. So I think there's a good chance that this, you know, the growth story is going to continue. It's not a kind of blip. Yep. I think we're in for a period of sustained growth. Now, in terms of its impact in the city, there was another report came out last week which said that as a consequence of those other things, we could expect maybe an increase in population for Southland of about 2,800. Or rather, we need 2,800 new workers. Oh, yeah. So that might be 5,000 in terms of, because they've got wives and kids. Yes, right? That's right. Yeah. So if you look at how that's made up, I would say probably 2,000 of those in terms of workers would be Invercargill. So what's the impact to that? Well, we need more houses. But on the other side, when those houses are built, and they'll need to pay for them ultimately, they're going to buy their houses, it will mean about probably $6 million extra a year in rates for us, right? Yep. That pays for the museum. True. Right? Yep. So most cities, when you get, you know, a whole lot of new people arriving, they've got to build new infrastructure. But actually, we're really lucky here. Good judgment. You know, we've got good infrastructure. We don't need to build roads and bridges and that stuff. It's all been done. So, you know, that increase in rates goes to the bottom line. Yes. And as I say, just so that people can sort of visualise it, I mean, that's about the repayment rate in a museum to pay it off over 10 years. So it's a, you know, significant impact. And I think it's a good, there is no way that anybody could ever spin it negatively as a really good news story for the city. Oh, it is. Yeah. As I
said, Invercargill City. I was talking to a guy at a late night venue just last week, and he was saying that there's tradies that just can't get enough trade people down here across all sorts of industries, which again says a lot about the region down here. But again, it's cheap to live, or cheaper to live. You don't have you have half the mortgage you do in Auckland, and you can still have a lifestyle down here. You're 10 minutes from the beach. You're 10 minutes from wherever.
So most people remember, 8 years ago, we did the Southland Regional Development Strategy. It was called SWORDS. That's right. And the objective that was set was an extra 10,000 people by the end of 2025. Yep. So, and that was Southland as a whole. So since then, we've increased the population by 8,000. Oh, wow. Okay. So, you know, the prediction that might increase by another 2, that's actually pretty much on the money. Yes. It's exactly what we were talking about, you know, 8 years ago. So the impediment back then was that the condition of the city centre was such that people were coming and looking at it, particularly wives, were coming and looking and saying, I don't want to live here. Yes. But that's changed, right? Yes. So attracting people, I think we'll be able to get people okay to come, including tradies, particularly tradies. It's where they're going to live. You know, that is the harder part, and the only role that council has really there is trying to free up land for them to be able to do it, and look at district planning rules to see whether they actually match what people expect these days. You know, sizes of sections, and can we encourage apartments, for example? Not everybody wants to live in a quarter acre anymore with a sheep out the back to keep the grass down. I mean, those days are gone. So anyway, look, it's a great problem we have actually for the city. Yeah. Where are we going to house people? Much better that than the other way around when the place is crumbling because nobody wants to live here.
Yeah, exactly. And now the topic is speed changes or speed limits. Obviously, the last government and council jumped in. I see some of the staff, and we reduced all of them, just like and there's a lot of questionable ones where, a prime example, Finley Road, they knocked that back down to 50, which I think the first part of it, leaving town, should be 50 maybe, but then needs to be back to 70. And then you'll obviously have some other options or thoughts.
So, I mean, I think I would agree with you, Mike, but just looking at the impact, though, of the changes that were made 3 years ago, I think it was 2021 that Council resolved to adopt a different set of speed limits, knocking Windsor and South City down, bringing the speed limit around schools down, changing the speed limit on a lot of roads, particularly the semi-rural roads like you describe, down to 60 instead of 80. Now, a couple of facts that are really interesting. So, back in 2021, that's a good year to check against because the changes were made in 2022, right? So, back in 2021, we had 462 accidents in the city. In 2023, we've had 340. That's a big change. That's a 25% reduction. If you look at the previous, before 2021, look at the previous, say, 4 years, the average number of fatalities in the city was 4. In 2023, we had none. Right? So bringing down the speed limits in appropriate places actually has worked. But of course, there are other places where you say, does it really need to be that low? So council have asked management to go away and look at, by exception, not changing the rules, but by exception, looking at whether a road is defined as urban or rural, because that's the distinction. Because if it's an urban road, it will be 60. If it's a rural road, it's 80. So that's the distinction that's made. And I think there are roads, well, we need to wait for the report. We've asked for it before Christmas. And we need to wait for the report. But I think what that'll show is that there are some roads. I think Curran Road is a good example. Finley Road is another one. Maybe the road to the beach after you go for the Arete Bridge. There's a few roads where you really want to look at where there's any evidence that reducing the speed has actually made any difference to the accident rate. So I think the outcome of that, without prejudging the report, I think the outcome of that might well be that some of those roads go back up. But what we don't want to do is lose the benefit. We've had 25% less crashes, no fatalities. That is a big improvement. So, but we can make a balance. Maybe we can get a better balance.
I think it's just bringing a bit of common sense back to it. A prime example is the schools. Yes, 100%. They should be around 30 at school. Time start and finish. But then outside that, on the weekends, what's the point of still going 30 past a school? You know what I mean? So there's wee things like that. But so it's going to be good. They're going to give it a review. I see the other thing, just while we're on roading or traffic. I see the government's signalling as well that they want to ease back on the road bumps, because I noticed here the road manager here at council didn't get the message that we didn't want the road bump on that Yarrow Street intersection with the lights that have been installed. And what did he do? He came back again with a second report, still pushing it. So someone needs to, hello, Doug, pick up the phone.
But I think, though, Mike, that what the new government has brought in is the concept of having to build in the economic factor into the equation. Yeah. So prior to that, the roading people, it was all about safety. Yeah. And there's no doubt that the slower you go, and maybe the more road bumps to slow you down you go, the safer it's going to be. But government has said, here, look, you've got to bring into the equation economic effect. So if you've got to have twice as many trucks on the road because they're only moving at half the speed, but you've still got the same number of goods to move. Yes. So if you're only moving at half the speed, you'd end up with twice the trucks. So are you really safer? So that's what this government has added into the thinking. Now, what we talked about just before, about our thinking about Finley Road and so forth, that's not so much about that. That really is more about state highways. Yeah. Because these little local roads, they're not the ones that are carrying the heavy goods vehicles so much in that. Yeah. But I think I know that we are going to find that this government are going to require us, in any situation where we want to reduce the speed limit, we'll have to prove that there is no economic disadvantage to doing that. And I support that. I mean, I think that's right. As long as there's balance, as long as
there's a case to justify if they want to reduce it. Yeah.
If we can show that, if we can show that there has been a substantial reduction in accidents as a consequence of the change, and also at the same time show that there's been next to no change in the economics of the thing, then I'd be surprised if the government wanted to push us that way. But it's mainly going to be the state highways, because they're the ones that are carrying the goods.
Final topic this week would have to be obviously councils and the Civic building, and obviously councils using a shared space, or sort of looking at working together a little bit more, or sort of a sharing of some accommodation, I guess, in one building. So what's your thoughts on that and how's progress?
We're probably talking about something that, if we can make it work, we're talking about something that's medium term, you know, kind of 5 years or maybe beyond that. But you're right, I mean, there is common sense that says that if you had a civic precinct where you could have all of the councils, so the district, the city and environment Southland, I mean, Gore are not going to come down, make no sense for them, but the other ones, if they were in the same civic precinct, there would be money to be saved. So that makes sense, and we are actually talking to each other about that. But no matter how, we have fair wind, no matter how that works, you know, we're looking at 5 years or something like that. There is a particular issue in this building, which is that this building was designed to last 100 years. It's gone 55 at this point. And like any building, you get to that midpoint where there's just a lot of stuff that's got to be done to tide it over the rest of the time. We've reached that point. So we've got $20 million in the long-term plan to do work in this building, which is basically to make it last. But if we're talking about, you know, maybe moving out into some kind of, you know, joint building, say in 5 years' time, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to throw, you know, good money after bad and, you know, spend another $20 million in this building now. So what we are working on at the moment, I don't have a solution, but what we are working on at the moment, what can we do to avoid spending that, or at least spending all of that? Because if we could avoid spending half of it, for argument's sake, I mean, that'd be a $10 million contribution to rates, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment, just looking at, well, how can a determination that we can avoid having to spend that money. And I'm hoping that, you know, we're not too far away from coming up with some ideas about how we can do that. Can it just let it go? Can it just let it go another 5 years because it's funny bits, you know? Yeah. And I'm not talking about structurally, but things like air conditioning systems and the electrics, all that sort of thing need a lot of attention. Yeah. Totally.
Well, that's 90 Seconds Plus with Deputy Mayor Tom Campbell. Until next week, we'll see you later. But don't forget, this Saturday and Sunday, it's the Southland Home Show at ILT Stadium. $10 entry for adults and children are free. And Mike and Kelly will be down there on Saturday. See you then.